and false news has become all too common. More alarming, some media outlets publish
Alrighty.
All right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 2025.
It's
Here we
crazy
are.
stuff. Yep. I know we were going to talk about briefly GTA 6, man. I'm excited. That's
Yeah,
pretty awesome.
comes out this year.
Yep.
Um,
I'm definitely going to play that one. I only play like 2 games a year, but that I just played the Great Circle, which is awesome. And of course, I play like the flagship games, like all the Uncharted games, the Red Dead games, stuff like that. Those are the kind of games I like.
Yeah.
Kind of first person or third person shooters. Adventure, not just like straight up shooters, right? But GTA 6, that'll be awesome.
I'm really sad that as a PC player, I've got to wait till 2026, mainly because when I built my PC, I built, the parts really to guarantee that I could play GTA 6 because
Is that
I
right?
feel like it's going to be the biggest game, I think, maybe ever so far. I just
Yeah.
think in terms of size
Well, they've
and
been
player
working
base.
on it for like 5 years, right?
And this, the state of GTA 5 and its player base and the world that it built, plus the progress they made in Red Dead Redemption when it comes to the combat and the immersion.
Yeah,
I just think it's going to be amazing.
it is.
The AI, no doubt,
Yeah.
technology in GTA 6 when
100%.
it comes to the people in the world, it's
Yeah.
going to be crazy.
I'm excited because to me, Red Dead 2, it, in my opinion, completely outplayed all the GTA games.
Totally.
And so I'm looking forward to hopefully GTA 6 taking this leap into story and more sandbox play, and because the GTA games, I mean, don't get me wrong,
They were gimmicky, kind of like,
they're classics. I'm not gonna talk, down on them, but they got a little bit redundant and boring for me. Once you played the story, it was kind of like,
Yeah.
Whereas Red Dead, it's pretty evergreen. I mean, you could go into that world and do all sorts of things as long as you're not getting sniped by a bunch of morons that are on there just to kill you. You
Yeah.
know, which
Yeah.
there's a lot of that. They have gotten better about it, but anyways, yeah, GTA 6. I think it's
We've
gonna
been
be
talking a lot about NVIDIA. I mean,
yeah.
talk about like when games like that come out and everybody's forced to buy new GPUs and whatnot.
Sure.
NVIDIA stock's going to go
Yeah,
through the roof.
buy some
So,
NVIDIA.
buy some NVIDIA.
I would buy it.
I should have bought some 10 years ago.
That and quantum computing. There's a list of some quantum computing stocks that I'm going to hit up pretty soon because they've already jumped a lot the last few months. I'm like, damn, I should have bought them then. But now it's like, okay, you need to get in because they're just exponentially going to go up as long as it's a good one.
Let's mention that for a second. And that kind of, I think, can segue into, I think we should go into the cyber attack that happened.
Which one?
Well, on December 27th, just in the past week, there was a huge, there's what the U.S. is saying, Chinese hack
Sure.
campaign.
Yep.
But in terms of, over the past break or before we, recorded last, there's a lot that's happened. And
Yeah.
we were talking about the other day, the quantum computing, huge major breakthroughs
Yep.
in quantum computing.
Yep.
And you know a little bit more about that than I do, right?
Well,
So-
anecdotally, I mean, I don't have a PhD, but
right.
it's something I read about. It's an interesting topic to me. And so, the leaps and bounds that quantum computing is making right now in terms of feasibility to scale is what's mind blowing.
Right.
Every month there's a new breakthrough with some calculation that last month it could do at this speed, now it could do at this speed. I mean, it's unheard of. It's like the meme you see where like if you saved $80,000 a day your entire life, you would still only have half as much money as Elon Musk. It's that
Right.
I mean that's the kind of exponential growth that's happening. It's like way beyond what the human mind can even comprehend when you hear about quintillions of millisecond calculations and all this kind of stuff. So
Those are just words. They're no longer numbers.
they're just words. That's exactly right. And it's interesting because technology gets to this point where it circles back to philosophical. It gets so far out there that you can't even
There's
ground
no way
it.
to grasp it without going back
Yeah.
to. And philosophy is nice. When I was in college, Professor Jelinek, I was taking another class. Our former guest, I was in his film class, breaking down film and narratives, and taking calculus. I was in a logic class, breaking
Yeah.
down just philosophy, right? And that's the nice thing about philosophy is you create these terms that help you. They're tools for explaining a complex problem, and it can be broken down to almost like a formula. And it seems to be that way with coding, where it's almost arbitrary, but not really. It's using language tools to do these processes in a way that you can understand, right?
100%.
And-
Super interesting on this topic. Last night I was watching an episode of Star Trek, old Star Trek Next Gen, and it was a really good episode. And for some reason, I don't think I'd ever seen it. But the thing about it is that they encountered a culture that they could not communicate with, and it was a humanoid culture, and they were trying to get past the language barrier of communication. And what they were able to figure out is that this other, species was trying to communicate with them through language that evoked stories from other cultures. So in other words, they spoke in metaphor. That was their mode of communication. And if you didn't understand their contextual framework for what they were talking about, you had no hope of communicating because you didn't know the stories that they were referring to. So they communicated more kind of evoking story and poetry thematically. And it was this whole thing where it's like, if you don't understand the grammar, there's no way you can understand the context or the language. And it was interesting. It was almost backwards from what we have building blocks that get you to a point.
Right.
And it's
in English, at least.
Yeah. And talking about language is what made me think of that. It's like the coding is the backbone of all this stuff, but it's getting to the point where it's beyond that, right? It's starting to learn itself, machine learn, and all this kind of stuff. And
it's probably building supplemental code that human eyes will never know or see.
Right. And it's getting beyond code almost to the point of the neural network. And like they've been talking how they don't even really understand how it's growing and evolving at such a fast rate. It's like past the point of language almost, which is interesting. So,
right. And, that's, when it comes to quantum computing, that's where everybody's saying, is it touching the multiverse? Is it creating like a subspace where time
is there a portal?
Right, where time and energy is not subject to the same laws, and therefore it can run, stuff that would take resources that would take maybe thousands of years to run a computation, but it can happen in an hour, right? That's just crazy. And that's what everybody's panicking, saying, that quantum computing is going to break all encryption, right? It's going to make, especially
crash
when it comes to
Bitcoin
or, Web3, when that, wallets and codes and stream keys being compromised. But also, if they can get that, I mean, your passwords and your emails, we're all toast.
Sure.
And that's where, this headline says, the White House, at least 8 U.S. telecom firms and dozens of nations are impacted by a Chinese hacking campaign. Started recently. It's apparently been going on for a week or two. And our Deputy of National Security Advisor, Ann Neuberger, was indicating that the hackers access private communications of Americans, particularly targeting senior U.S. government officials and political figures, right? And this,
Intel.
of course, we've heard the Russia cyber attacks, Russian troll farms, and but this they seem more like pretty concerned, and again, China's also making statements saying the U.S. is attacking them, and we're saying they're attacking us, and then we're saying, well, if we don't attack them, then they're going to keep attacking us. And so
this is all spycraft. I mean, it's the same old thing they were doing in 1950. The difference now is that there's more even playing field. Back then they had like the Enigma machine, and if you had that, nobody could crack it,
Right.
Whereas now it's like, I don't know, they're all using the same tools, different variations of the same type of things. To me, it's, this is a nothing burger, in my opinion. And it's like, they're going after senior officials for intel reasons.
right.
And like they say, we're doing the same thing, sharing intel. I can't imagine there's that many state secrets anywhere. Like, I think that
They said no classified documents or information was seized during the attack, only unclassified information.
they probably just want to find the UFO files. Be like, okay, what do they have?
Yeah. And they're calling the Operation Salt Typhoon, which I thought was kind of an interesting little nomer there.
That's a
But
weird
they
one.
gained access to like their private communications, including like text and phone conversations. Pretty wild stuff. I don't know.
That could be fairly dangerous if you start, making private communications public. They say,
Right.
oh, yeah, back channel, political back. What it would do more than anything is wreak havoc on our political system when they start to see that, like, oh, these factions are allied together. And it's like what happened with the Podesta thing when the, WikiLeaks leaked all the Clinton DNC stuff. It just kind of wreaked anarchy more than anything. And that's what this kind of thing does, I think, is it sows domestic distrust, which is a way to, I guess, overcome your axis, your enemies.
Right. Demoralization. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I would say that it is rather dangerous in terms of I don't care about the private lives of these public servants because they were really concerned with our private lives.
Yeah.
But these people can be blackmailed. These are
Yeah.
people that can be lobbied, and
Yeah.
that's a problem. I think that's
That's not good.
that's an
yeah.
outside threat strategically where
Mhm.
your people in power, their private lives and their private information can be leveraged against them to make certain decisions, and
Yeah.
then that impacts us, right? So that can affect. If you want to talk about impacting our democracy, we can vote that person in place, but then when they're got a gun to their head,
Yeah.
what are they going to do?
I
And
think
what
it's
would
just
anybody do?
it's a sign more than anything that we're living more and more in a public world. I mean, there's very little privacy in today's world, and it's just going to become less so moving forward, unless you choose to just go off the grid, right? That's the only way you could really maintain some form of privacy. But even then, at the end of the day, if someone wants to find out some information about an adversary or a person, they can. It's just all public information now, and
It's an illusion of security when it comes to the internet because your neighbor or your mom can't look at your stuff.
yeah.
But anybody out there with the proper tools,
Yeah.
you're like chaff in the
If
wind.
they really
For
want
most of
to,
the time, I'm not concerned with you.
yeah,
I mean, we're not big, fish to fry.
sure.
But
That's the whole thing. If you're not doing anything, I mean, that's this whole spying, the NSA thing, the Patriot Act. I'm of the mind that, like, look, if it takes a little bit of spycraft to stop, mass bombings, mass shootings, like, and I want to walk a fine line here because you don't want to live in a sort of fascist police state, but at the same time, these folks do need a little bit of wiggle room to do their jobs effectively. Now, we've seen how that could be abused if untrustworthy people gain power and start abusing FISA courts and going after people with Gestapo tactics or the Red Scare type stuff. That's not good. So, I mean, there has to be a check and balance to all of that. But at the same time, I see the importance of the spycraft that has to occur. And honestly, let's get real. They're going to spy on whoever they want to spy on
and always have.
any way that they can, illegally all day long. I mean, it's like the same reason they hire contractors in war zones. The contractors can do things that are outside of the Geneva Convention. They can do things that are outside of the rules of war, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing's happening now. You have all these black hat, cyber people that they hire to do all this stuff, and it's like, hey, we need information on these people. Go get it. And they're like, all right,
Yeah.
So that's the reality of the world we live in.
And on top of that, did you listen to that episode I was telling you about on the Joe Rogan podcast with Mike Benz?
I've seen some Mike Benz, but I didn't watch the one you're talking about, or I haven't listened to it
I
yet.
recommend everyone out there, and,
Yeah.
and it's really what this guy has to say.
Yeah.
He's
He knows
very
what's up.
learned and has a history in this. But we have all these NGOs that if you're not being affected by the cybersecurity strong arm of intelligence, you're going to be infected socially by, the social credit standards that get put forth, even just down to internet censorship or these other things where their whole job, it sounds like, oh, our job is to promote this and that. But it's really like they're building databases and trying to crunch down on the type of person and what type of behavior, that might denote, right? So
Yeah.
it is pretty tense, when your personal information is at risk. The government may not want to come and arrest you because you did or this or that on your cell phone, but you might, the direction we're heading, you might end up getting your social credit impacted, right?
Yeah.
So that information gets turned over to someone else who
Mhm.
has that list of who needs to be censored or this or that.
There is that. I
It's a
mean,
little spooky.
it is spooky, but the bigger concern I have is currency cash flow. So at the end of the day, these cyber attacks, privacy invasions, that all of your banking can be accessed and even deleted with a keystroke. So to me, you need to diversify where you hold your funds. Make sure you've got some cash, because if something happens one day that's not even intentional or nefarious, these things are so delicate, that your bank account could go to zero tomorrow if the wrong thing happened.
Have you watched the Justice League movie, I'm assuming?
Which one?
The first one where
Yeah.
they brought on like Cyborg.
I haven't in a long time, but yeah, I've seen
The
it.
scene where he gains access to all the world's internet and he sees all the stacks of cash, and then he
Yeah.
just grabs this little poor woman stack and just goes and makes her rich. Just,
Right.
obviously, that's happening virtually in his mind, but that to me, in my head, I was like, yeah, totally. Like
Mm-hmm.
from some center on the earth, that's what it looks like. Looking at all the bank
100%.
accounts
Yeah.
and just being able to go.
And
"Boop,
that may
let me
be what
just-"
China's doing more than anything else. You know, they're looking at our reserves. They know that we owe them trillions of dollars. I mean, in some ways, a lot of people say that they already own a large portion of our economy because of the debt that we have incurred.
They also hoard stacks. Talk about currency. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're infamous for just absorbing piles and piles of U.S. cash and holding on to it. And then when we say this or that about inflation,
Yeah.
they can be like, "Well, we're going to dump all this money right back in and
That's
mess
all
you
that
up."
Middle
Like,
East cash and gold. You know,
Yeah.
where did it ended up? It ended up in Russia's hands and China's hands. You know, because those Middle Eastern countries are spending that money to buy weapons and arms and all kinds of things. It's all, you know, it's a money laundering scheme.
Right.
It's like the whole thing. Then it comes back around to the Bidens somehow. I don't know. Just kidding. But I mean, seriously, there's a lot of money laundering and sketchy movement of government held cash funds. Whenever you send trillions or whatever it is of dollars into war zones, what do you expect's going to happen? It's like the Pentagon's failed 7 audits in a row. Where do you think all that money's going?
My thing is,
Into a lot
it
of
was the World
pockets.
Bank that loaned it to this side, and it was the World Bank that loaned it to that side.
Yeah.
So when it gets lost somewhere in the middle, as long as they know where it
Just
ended
handing
up,
it
they're
back
like,
and forth.
"We know you lost it
Yeah.
and ended up with our other
Yeah.
customer, but it's okay. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it."
Loan you
know?
this, you're going to loan it to me, and then yeah, big circle. The Chinese hacking is really interesting. I mean, you know, Chinese technology in general, the two big conversations around it right now are not, you know, they're all tech related, right? It's like, where are they with AI and this quantum computations, which they apparently have the fastest quantum computer now, supposedly. That was a headline from like a month ago. And then the other thing is like this gravitic propulsion. Do they have the fastest craft on Earth? And if so, who's the competition with them on all of this? And I think that's where the United States is struggling with the H-1B thing. It's like, well, we need this kind of talent to come in that maybe knows some computational things, some quantum things, you know, so that we can compete with foreign adversaries. But at the same time, we know that there's some spies getting in here through the H-1B. It's just a big melting pot at this point. I mean, the whole Earth is just, we're all, like I said, there's everything is known, in my opinion. I think these governments know everything about each other. It's open kimono at this point. They just, you know,
Yeah, totally.
you hack me, I hack you. Everybody, we are on the same page now. So
Well, and their, ambassador, he was the Chinese embassy spokesperson, Lu Pingyu, said the U.S. needs to stop its own cyber attacks against other countries and refrain from using cybersecurity to smear and slander China. Right? So we very well could be seeing this thing just like with the Russia, where
Yeah.
it's like, Russia spied on us to do this, and Russia's like, why are you bringing us
Yeah.
into it? Like,
What's the
you
big
know,
deal? We're-
we
hey.
could, we might, but we're
Yeah.
like, we're,
that's like the kid on the street
It's
corner.
creating
I
your
didn't have
own-
anything to do with this. It
Right.
wasn't. Yeah, no.
Right, it's creating your boogeyman, and living kind of in this global world of information where when you make a statement like that from the White House, I'm sorry, about this boogeyman who's a foreign nation, they hear that. It's not
Yeah.
just like you're in a room and it's not going across the world, right? People hear that, and so those statements can create more enemies. But China, I'm sure, is doing the same thing.
They are. Everybody is. Yeah. That's why I'm more interested in the moon.
Right, right.
I mean, is there anything more you want to? I mean, we've kind of hit the key points of this attack, this hack. I feel like I've covered about everything I know about it. I mean, is there any other thing we should hit before we talk about the moon?
No. Let's to the moon then.
Yeah, to the moon. It's funny that we brought up. Let's talk about the moon thing because the Moon Man just showed up here in the studio, and he proceeded. I think Moon Man knew we were going to talk about the moon today. So I don't know, the little lamp guy.
It was prepared. It was foretold.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's exciting news in 2025 and 2026. We're transforming the moon into humanity's first space hub. Found this article on Wired.com and sparked my interest, so I started looking into it. So because of the progress, we've talked about SpaceX and their new Starship. It's more capable than any rocket before of delivering a payload to the moon. So before, any rocket we launched is only able to get 0.1% of its payload to the moon. That means, if you thought about like a semi 18-wheeler, it would only be able to move one suitcase from point A to point B, just because of the amount of fuel required of what you can actually carry. Well, with Starship, SpaceX's rocket that can be launched and redeployed, it can get 2% payload. So while that's still not a lot,
Just doubled it.
right? Well, more so.
Yeah.
So from 0.1% to 2%.
Yeah, the more. Oh yeah.
I mean,
from,
we're talking about like 100
20 times.
Yeah, 100
Yeah.
100% increase. So that's pretty
Mm.
wild. And the fact that it can be launched, recovered, refueled, and reused is huge. That's never really been done before.
Yeah.
You know, before when you send a rocket up, it's toast. I mean, you just
Yeah.
wasted billions of dollars.
Yeah.
You burn it up, and then it fell out of the atmosphere. And
There's
now
some major
junk
breakthroughs.
in
That's
the
what-
water.
That privatization of commercialization of space flight has obviously done a lot. I'm still related to this topic, curious how these people have gotten stuck at the space station. Like, I don't understand. I think we mentioned that, but it's like, how do you only have one craft, and if it doesn't work, that's it? They're just stuck. Like, you don't have a backup. We don't have, like, we had 5 space shuttles, or 6 maybe. And if a space shuttle messed up, they'd send up another one. It might take a while because we got a launch window and we got to find the right time. But it's really weird to me. That whole story's weird. But
I think it's a difficult. I'm sure it's a difficult mission to actually get hooked up to the space station.
yeah,
It's one thing. I feel like they're all the time sending stuff up and down, right? Doing tests in different layers of the atmosphere.
yeah.
But when it comes to the logistics of like getting up that high,
Mhm.
where
Hopefully the moon's easier to hit.
I would imagine
bit of bigger
so,
target.
Bigger target. You're not having.
Do you
to-
think it's odd that we have not been back there since the moon landing? 1969. Like, we have not landed on the moon since then.
I
If
have
we-
my theories about it.
Well, I think we both do. It's really interesting to me that we're talking about, here we are 60 years later. It's like, oh, moon base. So maybe they've continued moon missions without telling us they have, because there's something there on the dark side of them. I mean, there's all these, paranormal theories about the civilization that lives on the dark side.
Missing minutes of the moon landing.
Yes, all this.
tapes
There's a
and-
bunch of stuff about all that. It is really cool. We're going back to the moon, and hopefully we do have a presence on the moon. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Total Recall, where it's like, at the end of the day, the mining colonies are on Mars, and it's horrible conditions, and they're there to
Right.
provide power to the Earth, and I don't know. It's I think it'll be a little more idyllic than the science fiction conditions of that movie, but it is super interesting to me. Would you go if you had the opportunity? Let's say a colony and they were like, "You want to go to the moon for 6 months?"
Yeah, the moon is way more plausible than Mars.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to wait a couple of years to travel to Mars and then wait, hang out over long. And then I feel like the Mars journey is like you decide that you want to live out the rest of your days on Mars. And you
Takes
go.
like a couple of years to get there, right? I mean, that's like, that's a pretty significant life
Hard to get back.
dedication.
It's gonna be expensive.
That's a major fork in the road. If you're like, "Yeah, I'll go to Mars," you're right. You're not going to come back.
You're not
Whereas the
gonna
moon's like a vacation. Like,
the Mars
months.
would be the new frontier. Think
mhm.
of it like the Wild West.
Yeah.
And once you go out down
Pioneers.
the Oregon Trail, you're not planning to go back to London.
You're either going to die on the way there, or you're going to last a couple months in the wilderness.
Yeah. Real quick before we go deeper, sidebar. I do kind of want to touch on it. What's your theory about the moon? Do you think we went? Do you think? Okay, first that's the question. Do you think we actually successfully made it to the moon?
I'm not sure. I've been on both sides of this issue in my life. There was a period of my life where I was certain we never did, and that I was convinced the entire thing was filmed in a studio in Hollywood and that it was all a scam. I still wonder. There's questions I have about a lot of the material evidence from the supposed landing, whether that be photographic or video. There's things that have occurred along the way that do not reinforce your belief in it being fact. Obviously the missing tapes is a big one. Like, how do you not? You have this monumental occurrence in human history, the first time humanity's landed on a lunar object, being the moon, and the live broadcast tapes disappear. I mean, this is known. You can go read about it. It's called the missing tapes. And so in other words, the signal being broadcast from the moon goes into a broadcast center at NASA so that the signal can be converted for live air into people's homes, right? There's different different types of technology that needed to be converted to be sent out across the airwaves. So in that conversion, it was taped, like the live feed from the moon was taped, and those tapes are gone. They've been gone. They're still gone. Nobody has them now.
Was those missing segments broadcasted on live TV, or were they missing from the live
The
broadcast?
the live to tape missing tapes was like the raw signal from the moon cameras. Now, the two nefarious theories related to this are one, that there's evidence of an encounter on the moon that cannot be shared publicly, whether that's extraterrestrial presence, foreign adversary. So that's why those tapes are gone. The second is that those tapes are gone is because it wasn't real. The whole thing was fraudulent, and that it was a part. And the context around all this is the Great Space Race. The thought being that we're in a technological race with a primary global adversary being USSR. It's a race to space. It's a race to the moon. And USSR had already put the first man in space. They had that,
It was like Yuri Gagarin.
Yuri Gagarin, yeah. So they had the first man in space, and some theorize that they were ahead of us in the space race. And then all of a sudden, we're on the moon. I mean, not all of a sudden. It took 10 years, but so I don't know. There's a lot of, and then you see photographs that show shadows. And they're like, shadows don't run two directions. Like the sun creates shadows this way. So why does this object also have shadows this way?
Or like the camera
that happens at a
filming
studio.
The landing was already on the
ground. Yeah, how's that already there? I mean, they obviously set up the shot. I don't know. It's a lot of hooey.
Yeah.
So
there's two questions really. It's like, there's the fact of whether we did in fact go to the moon, and then there's the question of did the footage we see, was that the authentic footage?
Yeah.
Right. I'm on the opinion that I think we did go, but I do think parts or some of the footage, or if not all of it, is a manufactured thing. And that's maybe that's a halfway woo-woo.
Yeah,
right?
halfway.
It's like I do believe that we went there, but I do think there was reasons why it had to be something different than what it actually was. Some people think, that's because the Earth's flat or something like that, right? Or,
I disagree with that one.
Aliens or something like that. I personally believe that we went to the moon, but not by rocket. I actually think there's some type of technology that was more of
like a Stargate?
A Stargate technology, either on an ancient site or technology that the Nazis had.
That'd be pretty cool. Well, the Nazis, they had a lot of those occult doors going on.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out how to, truly bend time, because a nuclear bomb's just a taste, right? So,
I'm still not sure.
I think something when they talk about going there but losing the technology, right? I think that has to do with some of it. And so now I think we're finally actually going there the proper way. And that's why it feels like they make it seem like it's a rediscovery.
Yeah.
They don't know how to use this, do this rocket, technology. And they're finally doing it properly. So here's where we can segue back into our topic. But yeah, I just think we're finally making the real authentic push to send rockets. And
going to have a moon base.
A space force.
Going to have a presence.
These other things. Right.
It obviously is all intertangled and interweaved with all the aerial phenomenon, astronomical phenomenon, the UAP stuff, what all's going on up there in our atmospheres, and what is everybody doing, and this whole drone thing in, New Jersey, and who is that? Is it China? Or are these interdimensional craft?
Are they regular drones? Are they gravity propulsion drones?
Yeah. I'm glad we're going to have a moon base. We might already have one.
Right.
That we don't even know about. I don't, it's like, okay, time to show it to everybody. I don't know. It's like,
right. Hopefully. Hopefully we already have one, or, somebody does, but if not, we're going to build one. And the cool thing is you got Starship that's going to be doing a lot of the back and forth. You've got Blue Origins is another company that's really involved in this process, and they're making the Blue Moon lander, like once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
But that's
I wonder how much a ticket's going to cost for somebody to go. 100,000 more than that.
Unless you're working the job, you know what I'm saying? That might be the proper way to do it.
Yeah, try to get in.
Working on an oil rig or working in Alaska. You just sign on.
Well, there's different aspects of this, right? You got the SpaceX Starship, the Blue Origin moon lander, NASA's the Artemis missions. Yeah, you got kind of multiple different things happening.
Right, and with NASA's Artemis missions, that's kind of the revival of this push to get back to the moon.
Yeah.
So in late 2025, the Artemis 2 mission...
That's this year.
It'll be the first crewed flight of the Orion spacecraft that will go around the moon. It will test systems for future lunar landings. Then for 2026, Artemis 3 mission will see the first humans land on the moon since Apollo.
There we go.
We'll be focusing on the lunar South Pole where water ice might be present. This is where, the next step is building the lunar gateway. here's why again. I'm thinking I felt like
Stargate, that's a great
yeah,
movie.
an
Yeah.
orbiting space station around the moon, key for logistics and as a staging point for lunar surface missions. And its construction will begin in 2025 with the launch of initial modules. So what they're essentially going to do is be, using Starship and Blue Origins to be getting stuff up there, slowly build
Isn't that amazing?
base around
They're
the
basically
moon.
going to build a starbase on the moon. Because you think about, like, if we want to go to Mars, you've got to launch it from the moon. Because the Earth's atmosphere, it takes so much to just get out of our atmosphere.
I think the pollution.
They won't have to use any of, they won't have to use all that energy and fuel to get out of our atmosphere. They'll already be out of it.
Right.
And launching off the moon, it'll just be like a drop in the bucket compared to what they've had to do from Earth. It's super interesting to me that they're gonna do this, like build an entire. I mean, that's a huge, like, it's a big deal to build one on Earth,
Right.
but to build one up there, I wonder what the timeline is, for something like that to get done. It's going to take quite a long time, right? I mean,
That's kind of the goal. The lunar base is really, it's to be a staging point, right? And that's where, I was really excited to talk about this topic because when we're talking about, putting aside any chance of the, total extermination of humanity or some type of apocalyptic situation, our future, I believe, is expanding in, our solar system, at least that's possible. And the natural steps, when people talk about these, what's his name, Michio Kaku, he talks about the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 civilizations.
He's got some good books for sure.
I think part of getting there, major part of getting there,
he talks about Gates a
is
lot.
learning to harvest the resources off planet, whether it's asteroids or the moon. And then you're able to send resources here that makes resource scarcity not even a thing anymore, right? So we can prosper as a race because and we're also not harming our environment. We're not using limited resources here. And I think to do that, you have to establish, outer atmosphere, or in this case, the moon, operations that are, harvesting resources off planet, but also have, a major 3D printing aspect where once you get something set up there, you don't have to keep sending stuff up.
Yeah.
It's going to be able to harvest the resources and then create and manufacture.
Well, it's the replicator, right? It's the Star Trek replicator where it's like, I need you to make this for me. Could I have it? Do. Well, I mean, Musk, something he's harped on for years and years and years is that, like you're saying, we have to be a multiplanetary species if we want to survive in the long term, So it is a bold move to do this. It's something that's been in the works that they've been planning to do. It's nice to see it's actually going to happen. Hopefully they can stay on task.
It feels sudden.
It does, but I think it feels sudden because we have not been in the loop. Like it's almost like they've been getting it already the last few years, and it's like, okay, here we go. Now we're gonna put out the press release.
Right. I do recall. I mean, I think it has partially to do with, knowing that Trump is the inbound president, because a major thing when Musk kind of made his first initial endorsements for Trump after the assassination attempt.
Yeah.
It struck me one of the things he said, and he choked up saying it. It's kind of corny, but he's like, if he doesn't win, like, we won't get to go to Mars. We won't be able to send rockets up, right? And then he choked up saying that.
I wonder why.
Well,
regulations would kill him.
He spoke about, people in the Biden administration were kind of attacking SpaceX and Tesla on multiple fronts with lawsuits from things like,
isn't that crazy?
DEI hires. Right?
We don't like you, so we're going to kill your company.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you have to hire asylum seekers, according to the Biden administration, but due to NASA's directives, because they're in it's a national security project, you can't hire anybody but U.S. citizens, and they have to be verified. Yeah. So it's like, what he's saying is on multiple fronts, I was stuck with, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And, like, hailing back to, I could tell that his passion is really to go beyond and to take humanity whatever level he believes in. And he understood that, like, whatever was going on politically was going to affect his dreams. And
that's true of all.
It wasn't so much he wanted to get involved in politics for power. I think
corporate compliance.
I think he cared about what he cared about. And when it came, I felt the same thing in like 2021-ish when I was really into crypto and Web3.
Sure.
Not so much just cryptocurrency, but more about Web3 and that technology.
Encryption and all that.
And they just came after it. They did everything from a social project in Hollywood to...
Well, if you challenge the status quo,
right?
That's it. At the end of the day, it's like, no, that's our department. You can't do that's like the whole him with space, and it's funny because he's like, in terms of the Green New Deal, you'd think they would be his chosen child because of all he's doing for, you know, renewable energy, and yet he's hated because of these other reasons, and you know, like
The Twitter files was the beginning, I think, because
mhm.
beforehand I mean, he was especially the Tesla, right? Because we hear all the time about how in California, prior to him buying X, I mean, having a Tesla was like a sign that you were doing your civic duty
It's
to
amazing
the
how
earth.
fast the media's public opinion can turn on you if they just don't like you.
Now
You
he's an
know.
alt-right extremist
Yeah.
empowering
Well,
the
it's like all those
enabling.
shows that used to have Trump on and talk to him, and he was their buddy, you know, Oprah and Morning Joe and all these. And then
They felt lucky to have
he
him on.
became like enemy of the state #1. It's
Right.
like we got to change our messaging and programming. He's all these other things. Well, I'm glad that it's worked out the way it has, because I would like to see us go to the moon. I would like to see the SpaceX journey continue,
I
and
want to go to space, man. I
it
think
would be
within
pretty
our
cool.
lifetimes, it will be a reasonable,
Yeah, I would do it.
affordable thing. It might be an investment of like kind of like any big trip. Like
The
if you were
moon
to
is the
go,
furthest I would go, though. I wouldn't do the Mars thing.
yeah, me neither. I would
But-
want to go into atmosphere and maybe see the moon
Mhm.
and see the Earth from the moon. That would be I think, aside from when we had the lunar eclipse, the full lunar or
That was cool.
solar eclipse.
Yeah,
whatever,
last year. Mhm.
last year.
We can say last year now.
Yeah, we can.
I haven't seen you since last year.
That's right. That's right.
Dad joke. No.
But yeah, no, like
Sorry.
I think that would be the most just humbling sight that would bring you to tears to see your planet
Yeah.
like you see the stars. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. I do.
I don't know, it'd be a beautiful thing. I would definitely do it.
I imagine it'd be very good for the mind
Mhm.
and soothing, you know, for the soul, especially if you're one that has spiritual leanings as I do and you do. Like,
You would feel among the stars.
because to me, it wouldn't, yeah,
More
like
than
I
around.
wouldn't feel the nothingness that maybe an atheist would. You know, like I would feel more so I don't know,
The wonder.
the amazement, the wonder, the awe. Yeah. Be like, wow, this is awesome. You know,
Yeah, no
as
doubt.
opposed to the nihilist loneliness. Like,
To do just like a little meditation, like an observation dome on a moon base would just, yeah, that'd be a game changer.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, how, you know, what they will get this trip down to, how long how long a trip will be if you're just on a lunar visit.
Right.
You know, is that like a
Vacation.
2-month window? Is it like they prep you for a month and you go for a week, then you come? I don't know. Because there's obviously launch windows and all this kind of stuff they got to deal with. So,
Right. One cool thing about this that I think is a very innovative technology that will go way beyond just this is, at the core of this lunar economy that's going to be started up is fuel and the ability to refuel once there.
That's
And
cool.
this company called StarPath is their startup, and they've raised a lot of money. So they're kind of like one of the supplemental companies under Blue Origins and SpaceX. What they're planning to do is to set up a solar array on the moon,
Mhm.
and then they're going to have the robotic miners that go out and harvest what's called regolith.
Pretty
I've never
neat.
heard that term.
I
I'll have to
hadn't
look it up.
either. This is the first time I've seen that. Yeah.
It's essentially moon dust that's collected from, just space dust falling on the moon.
Yeah.
Because they don't have enough of an atmosphere to block it out, but they have enough gravity to pull, space garbage. So they're essentially able to harvest this icy space dust, heat it and pressurize it to turn it into water,
Mm-hmm.
and then they separate it out, the hydrogen and the oxygen, and they're able to take the oxygen and convert it into rocket fuel. Don't ask
Pretty
me how
awesome.
that works.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the top guarded secrets when it comes to physics and
Mhm.
rocketry,
A lot
is
of
how
this
you actually make
energy.
rocket fuel.
Yeah.
Which that's actually a story of itself. Are you familiar with the Jack Parsons story?
Which one?
Well, just that he created rocket fuel,
Mhm.
jet fuel, and
He's the father of rocket science.
he was involved with Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, I know all about that stuff.
And
Yeah.
also L. Ron Hubbard, which is Scientology.
Uh-huh.
They were really
The
good.
timing
buds.
of all that was very interesting
Very much
because
I mean, he claimed that other occult forces helped him create the formula. For
I believe it
rocket fuel.
100%. I mean, that was in, the 40s. Tesla said the same thing. Like he was in communication with
Edison did too.
Yeah,
he said he'd
they-
just have a nap and
they were
pray, and
gifted
God would show him something.
technology in their dreams or in visions or, and I believe that 100%. Then the question becomes, is it humans from the future or is it interdimensional species, and who knows? I don't know, but it's
From a-
100%.
from a biblical context, it does mention in like a pre-flood world where angels came down and showed men
Oh yeah,
different things. Like this angel was the dude who
they
did
built the
math,
pyramids.
and this one was the guy who showed us how
Yeah.
to make steel.
That was one of the cool things
make
about that
swords.
Indiana Jones game. That new Indiana Jones game is
You
all
were
the.
telling me about that.
It's pretty cool. its story is really good. I mean, it
I'll
goes
have
in.
to check it out.
Yeah, it goes into the Nephilim and the giants of old and the builders of the pyramids, and I mean, it was neat. I liked it because it lived in the lore of Indiana Jones, which a lot of his lore is that it's kind of like deep-seated, ancient, beyond artifacts, but into like spiritual and God interaction stuff. And
Right.
it was the story in the game. I'm like, this is the best Indiana Jones movie other than like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, the story's awesome.
That's why I love those topics, because I feel like there's a point in pre-human history where all stories converge, and it usually does involve both, aspects of a flood,
The flood, yeah.
of certain giant monster hybrid creatures,
Mhm.
of certain off-world, whether it's Anunnaki or fallen angels, whatever it is, that
Yeah.
these beings coming down
Enochian.
and trying to be gods
Mhm.
and show us and give us things, but also make us serve
It's
them.
all saying the same stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the ancient astronaut theory, I mean, all that is like pointing to the same thing.
In this kind of Tower of Babel, like this pinnacle civilization of humankind.
Which I'm sure if in fact that all, they probably had some dealings on the moon. Who knows? Maybe there are structures on the moon, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's where like my little woo-woo theory of like holding out that, I think there was some technology we either figured out from physics that was related to like CERN research. Maybe that's what CERN's all about, is how do we rediscover how to, use
portals.
the portals. Or we realized that once we did it once, that it's dangerous, right? So kind of like with nuclear, once we realized we opened Pandora's box, maybe it made all these more UFOs show up. Maybe it
Well, imagine
could
the
implode and make the whole world and atmosphere.
imagine
catch
the
on fire,
unknown
right?
danger. Like even with considering a portal technology or something. Imagine all the people that died of them just trying to figure it out. Like, or
Right.
people going into it and never coming back. Be like, oh, they're gone.
Right.
Like we don't know where they are.
You just teleported them out to the middle of vacuum
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, like
Their
who
body
knows?
just imploded. Like,
Yeah, exactly. There was a new Star Trek storyline in Strange New Worlds, which was pretty cool. They'd never really done this in Star Trek before, but basically in the transporter system, where they teleport people, they were actually they were able to store like you in there. So the example they used was in a battlefield, a guy got mortally wounded. They weren't able to treat him, so they essentially put him into stasis in the transporter. They're like, all right, just put him in the transporter. And they kept his DNA pattern or whatever all in the transporter. I was like, that's really cool.
so
So
he
in a
didn't
sense-
go from point A to point B. He got put into it and held,
Yeah.
and then
Yep. And
That's
then
crazy.
that way they could bring him back whenever they had something to help him live or whatever. I thought that's pretty cool. That's the idea of being lost in the portal. It's like, well, who knows if if like
Right.
Stargate, you walk through it and never walk out. I mean,
right.
you're in the interdimensional space dust or whatever.
Yeah, I watched this YouTube video that kind of broke down the teleporting theory of Star Trek, and the hole he was trying to punch into was that the nature of the technology is that it disassembles all your particles,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only two theories: it either disassembles them, copies it, and prints it somewhere else, right? So the assumption is that you are the sum of your parts. So if you put all your parts back together, you will come back,
Or you
right?
become a clone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You either have died and a clone you is
Yeah.
made, or truly there's like a weird essence that's you, and that essence can teleport even though your physical matter is restrained. So yeah. Or you can create two versions of yourself,
Mhm.
and then there's like a version of you that has to be the old you has to be killed.
Yeah.
So the new one walks out. Yeah, definitely interesting.
Wild stuff. Well, I don't think we'll have that anytime soon. But the moon journey, I think, will continue to be analog. You'll have to get in some type of craft that takes you up there. You know? It's pretty neat though. The broader implications, the economic development aspects, the scientific exploration. Like obviously the moon, like you said, being a manufacturing base for other kind of space-bound missions, like we're talking about, being able to blast off. The production of resources on the moon. I don't know. All that lends itself to more broader exploration of humans going into deep space because, NASA sent a lot of stuff into deep space, but no people. So this will hopefully open up doors to that, where they could actually send some, or probably the first deep space explorers will be humanoid robots. They'll probably be like, okay,
Optimus
C-3PO,
robots.
yeah, we need you to go on this mission for us.
Yeah.
Send you on your way. Then you can get up there and walk around and.
Yeah, and having
Yeah.
the home version where it folds your laundry is just the way they subsidize
Yeah, that's
the
right.
space missions,
That's
right?
right.
To develop the technology to send a robot who's capable of flying a rocket ship
Mm-hmm.
and doing telemetry data
On
and
those dangerous
collecting
missions.
samples and whatnot. What are your thoughts about, the commercialization of space, of course, and getting to the moon, but
Mm.
also we're starting to settle another celestial body. So
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about that? I mean, what are the ethical implications? But also, it's going to change, or maybe it won't change any. Maybe it's just like colonizing another island, essentially.
I'll tell you my sort of overview of this. It's so fascinating to me that we could be simultaneously, becoming multiplanetary in the early stages at the same time that we still have at least a billion, if not 2 or 3 billion people on Earth living in the Stone Age. Like the gap between human knowledge in terms of digital life versus an analog life is mind-blowing to me. It's just amazing that we have these sort of untethered societies, some of which are global and have millions, if not billions, of members that still perceive that living in a past Stone Age lifestyle is somehow good for their well-being. And it's interesting. It's hard for me to resolve that in my own mind. I mean, and I'm not just talking about sort of uncontacted tribes of the Amazon. I'm talking about like,
I think about like Amish folks or like Mennonite folks.
yes,
that
and
choose
there's a
not to
lot
use
of
electricity.
cultural religious people that are seated in the past, that haven't even caught up to where we are in terms of human rights and, like base level existence at the same time that another subsection of said species is exploring deep space. Like, it's just like, isn't that wild that
Yeah.
we're coexisting?
What's
I mean,
interesting too is like what you're saying is like the people who are advanced to the point where we could be doing or even talking about deep space exploration.
yes.
There's a certain structure, social code, or viability of whatever your underlying culture's program is
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to get there, or has had enough time, right, to get there. And when you get there, you're the society that starts thinking about how you share it with everybody, right? Because that's your mindset. You've progressed into these values where it's like
That's the humanistic
space exploration should be a global thing. We should just all become one,
Yeah.
and we'll fund it, right? Like
Mhm.
you have this idea of we'll just make it for everybody. But again,
There's still all this adversarial.
you're the only one that got there. You're the only one thinking like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then these other cultures maybe aren't thinking like that, thinking for themselves. They're not thinking about it at all.
Well, they
They're not
might
even capable
even
of it, so they're like,
they might even prefer us all to live in the Stone Age
right.
under some
Right.
archaic laws. Like
I
there's
doubt some dude in like Borneo
mm,
living off in a fisher village on one of the micro islands is too worried about the moon base
Yeah.
or how he can help
Yeah.
or what culture
No,
or language is spoken up
That's
there.
not to say that there's something to be said for a ascetic lifestyle, but there's a difference between ascetic lifestyle by choice and ascetic lifestyle because you're forced to adhere to an extreme societal set of rules and standards that are not even human, that are authoritarian and really at their root evil. A lot of, there's a lot.
Aggressive, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of regressive evil occurrence in some of these cultures that I'm not sure what's going to happen in the long term. Like, how do you progress all of humanity towards this viable, equal human standard and coexist at the same time with Sharia law or other archaic standards of lifestyle?
I totally agree.
I don't really. It's hard for me to come to terms with that.
Regressive regressive is an interesting word because it doesn't necessarily mean that everything about your tenets is saying you want to go backwards. but it just means that whatever that makeup of your formula is stunts people and reverts back. And I think a problem with that is you just have to look at the outcomes. When you have hundreds or thousands of years under one culture, what happens? And I think with Western culture, with its underlying Christian principles, biblical principles that I think that drove it to things like, compassion and kindness and equality under the law. These are things that lead to progressive ideas that lead to where we are currently in, social thought. They haven't elsewhere, right?
And there are many regressive.
If you're a gay person in the Middle East, you're going to
Sure.
get persecuted. You're going to be killed.
Not in all of the Middle East, but yes, in certain parts. And that's not to say
you can't drive or read.
And it's not to say that there's not regressive forms of religion in others, because there are. I mean, Sharia is not by itself. Like there's plenty of other regressive thinking in other religions,
Right.
But I'm just talking broadly. For any type of old world thinking that holds back, this humanity, this evolution towards a Star Trek universe, like, to me, it's a tough pill to swallow, and it's hard to have both exist together at the same time in my mind. It's sort of like, again, it's that incredible dichotomy between deep space exploration and women can't drive, or like you're saying,
Can't read. They're not allowed.
yeah, not allowed to go to school. If you don't pray 3 times a day, we cut your head off. That's the extreme stuff, right? The ISIS and whatnot, like, and that's a very small percentage, right? The majority of the Muslim
They're the ones
world,
taking control, though.
majority of the Muslim world does not live under Sharia law and does not adhere to this extreme, type of standard of life. But there's still a large, portion of people, both in the Hindu world and the Islamic world, that do live in substandard equality. We're talking about billions of people. So
Yeah, except for maybe like Iran and Saudi Arabia. I feel like most, due to just the past 20, 30 years of the U.S.'s activities over there and just recent developments, most of these, governments we were supporting that were more friendly have collapsed, and we've moved out. So these new groups, they are the Sharia law people, and there's maybe, and Iran and Saudi Arabia kind of get a pass because they have so much wealth and they have so much.
Well, Saudi Arabia
connection
is a really
influences.
interesting one, because that's an incredibly wealthy country
Right.
that is rapidly moving towards technology, embracing everything that technology has to offer.
And they're Western allies.
They're Western allies. They're living in a Western modern world. So you can do two things at the same time, but the one thing the Saudis have always been good at is politics and talking. Like they're very good at
Statecraft.
balancing those things, and so that's a good example of how maybe these things could coexist. But the more violent state actors, that are oppressive and actively seeking to make their will on the world, it's going to be a tough world for them, I think, in the years, decades ahead.
Well, I guess it depends on how far, down the rabbit hole you want to go. But I do think if the United Kingdom and the United States would back off, and France is actually a huge player in the Middle East, more than I ever knew. But because they have a lot of interests in whether it comes to India or Pakistan, whatever. But if we would back off, I think we would have more stability in the region. And if we maybe focus on space, give
Well, I
these
assume
people
that
more somewhere to put their energy. But
I assume that if there's a UN on
renegade.
the moon, like if there is a UN on the moon, that every member of the UN will have a representative there. So, that would include some of these more extreme cultures. So it's coming whether you like it or not. I think that's the bottom line. Like the progression of technology is occurring, and you are in it whether you want to be or not. So those cultures will have to evolve or be left behind in
Well, it's
sort
like
of these
any-
island
Right.
communities,
It's like any sport. If you want to play a game, you have to create a set of rules and boundaries and players. And then if it's an entertaining sport, then people want to watch, people want to be fans, they want
Then
to
they'll give you your money. Yeah.
Right. So there has to be some balance between this game is not for everybody. right? Creating a space civilization that can carry the best and brightest of humanity into the depths of space. It's not a game for everybody, so we have to define those rules and parameters.
Yeah, I don't think I
and
could pass
values.
those tests.
I'm not talking about like physically or
No, I'm
you know,
talking about science, calculus or what the math tests. I couldn't pass all that stuff.
I mean more along like the values and the type of person and space culture we want to send out and
Oh, yeah,
represent
sure.
humanity, right? So, like you're saying, from these spreads of this culture to that culture, I don't think we're gonna. I'm perfectly okay if we just say, hey, the United States is gonna go do this, and we're gonna spread these values out in space, or
I
these
think
laws.
that'll be a multinational effort. I don't think it'll be. I think much like the space station was International Space Station, right? Even through the Cold War, cosmonauts and astronauts would work together. So I think that will continue. And
I think it'll be trans-corporation type thing.
oh, for sure, yeah.
I think the UN, it'll be like you said, like a UN governing body. They'll set up like some space oversight board, and then companies like SpaceX or Apple or Microsoft, Amazon will be these big companies that go and set up operations.
Yeah.
So you're under their,
There may be that
jurisdiction,
may already
and then
exist, by the way.
UN regulatory bodies.
That
will
global
oversee.
government, that global governance board that made the deal with the multidimensional extraterrestrials, right? That, like the rest of this, may just be a play for us to watch on
Right.
television and read about in the newspaper. Like there might be something beyond all of this that we're not even aware of, which
Right.
is what a lot of the sort of UFO community likes to get back to. Is that like, well, this is, China and the United States are actually allies.
Yeah.
And they're all working on this, technology together. Like, I don't
Yeah, I mean, if it goes how I think it will go, the moon-based civilization setup of society will be a good test for I think how they'll want things to be here on Earth. Where really corporation, there's no more country borders anymore. It's like what company that's bigger than most countries is in control of that area or that
Yeah.
resource. What are their rules? You're an employee / citizen of their corporation, and then you have your compliance, and as long as you're in compliance and doing your role, then
You're good.
You're good.
Yep.
Moonbase will be an interesting little experiment for that, I think.
I agree. I concur.
So
Right on. Good conversation today.
yeah, some great stuff. I'm glad we got to kind of touch from computer technology, science to space stuff. It really is like I think a cool passion. I played this game called Star Citizen, and it's I think the best space simulator.
I've never
out
played
there.
that.
But the funnest thing about it really is the jobs you can do. And one of them is salvaging, right? You just get this big thing. You go out to different crash sites, salvage it, then you go
Like
to
a
your
Jawa.
cargo, right? You go to
Yeah.
your cargo bay, and then you print out your materials,
That's
and
cool.
then you fly across space to
Yeah.
like sell it for the best price.
Did you ever
Man,
see the movie
That
Moon?
would be a fun. I
Yeah.
never thought like, man, I would love to be a space.
That would be
a
cool.
Space salvager.
Space salvager. Well, the flip side of that is the movie Moon, which is like a moon base that the guy's on by himself.
Right.
It's good, but it's interesting. I mean, it gives you a different idea of
Right.
how a moon base might become reality.
Right. Or
So-
in Westworld in the later seasons, one of the main characters, he's just like a construction worker, but
Mhm.
he really just has a robot that he just stands beside it while it's doing the work, making sure it does things
Yeah,
properly.
he monitors the.
Maintenances
Yeah.
it. That's kind of what I feel like, the future of a lot of stuff was going to be like. So
Mhm.
we'll see.
Right on.
Well, Arnie, brother, great show today.
Yeah.
Glad to be back out in the new year.
Yeah.
We're going to keep up the momentum.
Sounds good. See
All
y'all
right, thanks,
later.
everybody. Take it easy.
Extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.